Today, we are diving into the big topic of authenticity, what it really is, what it isn't, how you might develop more of it, and some of the mistakes leaders make around authenticity. And to dive into this discussion, I am joined by Level 52 coach and facilitator, Julie Dupont. Julie, welcome to the Executive Commute.
Thanks, Jayson.
Now, you work closely with leaders. What is it that pulled you into coaching and facilitation?
I've wanted to make a difference in the workplace because we spend a heck of a lot of time there, right? If you think about, what is it? I think 60% of our waking hours are spent at work. It makes such a huge difference, right? Uh, I was young. I saw the dads who came home from work and they were calm and relaxed and they kissed their kids. And then I saw the dads who came in from work and they're kicking the cat and swearing at the kids, right? And just those attitudes come Sunday night where the person says, yeah, I got to work tomorrow, no big deal. And those people who dread Monday morning. And I got really curious about it. And so want to figure out, what is it about the workplace? And I'm not saying that we know job satisfaction is a character trait, but I want to say, what is it about the workplace that leads people to feel so differently about it, right? What's happening in these workplaces? And so that's where I just got really curious about workplace psychology. And so went to school for that. And I want to figure out, how do I work with leaders to create the kind of environments where their people are going home with energy left over to hug their wives, kiss their kids, and still be able to contribute to their communities versus plop on the couch and just dread the next day.
And you've had experience working in large and small organizations. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. So most recently, I was in a corporate position for approximately 10 years. And it was awesome. I mean, it was a great place to work. I loved the boss I had, who totally embodied a lot of what I teach. And I love that, because when I am teaching and I'm talking about here's the best practices of leadership, and here are things that great leaders do, people will be like, nobody does that. That's not real. And be like, actually, I know someone. And so I love being able to tuck that away in my back pocket. But yeah, I've also worked in small organizations and consulting, and it's kind of nice because you get a picture of both sides, right? So you kind of see the way the system works from the inside and how decisions are made, but also coming in from the outside. There's a bit of a credibility that comes with that, because you have to keep on top of the latest best practices to be relevant. So yeah, it's cool.
So you've had a leader that sets the standard. Describe some of the qualities in that leader.
So many. I think the biggest thing was, it's funny, we're talking about this, right? Authenticity. The biggest thing would be how this person showed up and made others feel like it's okay to be yourself around them, that they accepted you, that what you had to say mattered, that the trade-off you were making, the trade of time for money, was worthwhile, and that even when things, when he was having a bad day, which, I mean, he happened, he's still human, but when he was having a bad day, it wasn't about closing himself off or taking it out on others, and just kind of being real about it, right? Hey, I'm having an off day. Like, give me a little bit of space. And we gladly respected that.
Yeah, we all suffer from the human condition.
Mhm.
We may not always express it the same way, but we all suffer from it. There's something that you said earlier, that career satisfaction is a character trait. Tell me about that.
According to the research, which may be, I mean, don't forget, I went to school a long time ago. And at that time, they were talking about how job satisfaction, yes, can be a big part of it, has to do with the environment that people are in. But there are some that just carry this trait that no matter the job that they're in, they will not be satisfied. They will kind of always find fault with something about their concept of what work is, just has this negative twist to it. And so you have some people who will find fulfillment, will find purpose in whatever job they're doing. They bring the work ethic naturally, and then others just don't. And so what makes that really hard for leaders is, who's on your team? How hard do you work on trying to sway those that may never buy in, versus really investing a lot of our time? I mean, they say so many times that 80% of a leader's energy is spent on the 20% who don't want to perform. Like, yeah. And it's a small number. Like, let's be honest. I'm not talking, this is not a 50-50 split. It's a small number. But, really trying to figure out, how much time do you want to invest in that? Sometimes they are so good workers. They're getting the numbers, or they're producing the results. It's, how do you put them into a role that, they're your steady eddies, they show up, they get the job done, but they're not actually creating an environment where others are being pulled over to their side.
Career satisfaction, it ultimately, according to research, positive, whether you're positively oriented or negatively oriented, will make a big difference. I wanted to drill into that because you said it, but we're here to talk about authenticity. And I'm going to ask possibly the hardest question. And that is, what is it that makes you qualified to speak about authenticity?
When I was doing my coach training, one of the things they have us do is take a character strengths survey. And you do it consistently just to kind of see what's going on for you at that time. And consistently, authenticity came up as my number one character strength. Funny thing is, I wasn't surprised about that because I've always felt like I'm just me. I'm just me. I think when I saw that the character strength was reinforcing what I already believed about myself, I started to notice a little bit more like, how is that really showing up? Right. So, what is it? You kind of know you're yourself, but when somebody says, oh, hey, look, this assessment says, right, you start getting really curious about it, or at least I did. And so I started kind of looking for, what does that mean? How is that showing up for me? And I think when I really started to think about it, it was like, what are those situations when authenticity is alive and well? When is it working for me and when is it not? And I think that's where a big part of the learning for me came through, was realizing it's not a bad thing to be authentic. It's not a bad thing to be yourself and to act in alignment with your values. But when are you using it as a crutch? Or when might you be using it in such a way that it no longer serves you? And that's where kind of my authenticity journey began, where it's like, okay, I really want to start getting deep on, what does it really mean for me? And I think it's different for everybody. Like, I don't think authenticity, being authentic, I don't think it looks the same for everybody. I really don't. I think it's a personal thing. It's what being authentic looks like for me, given my perceptions, my interpretations, my experiences, my education, like my family background, all that stuff, I think is going to look very different than, say, you, Jayson. If you're like, yeah, well, when I'm my authentic self, this is what it looks like. So it's hard to say this is what authenticity is and everybody should act this way, but I think there are some common threads where it's like, how can you tell when someone's being authentic? When might they be mistaking what being authentic means? And so I think
Well,
that's the work that I've been doing.
okay, well, maybe that's a great place for us to start, is to lock in a definition. When you say authenticity, what are you talking about?
When I think about it, it really means living, acting, right? What people see on the outside is in line with what's going on the inside. Now, what that doesn't mean is if I'm angry, I'm blowing up, So it's being true to yourself, living in line with your values, not putting on airs or acting like something you're not, but also doing that through the filter of, and I might talk about this a lot because I think they're really closely intertwined, but through the lens of emotional intelligence skills, right? So being able to have the self-awareness to know, hey, I'm actually veering away from my authenticity, or hey, I'm acting in a way that isn't authentic, or man, am I being authentic right now, but it's harmful. It's harmful to relationships. And so I think we need that self-awareness. We need that self-management. And people say, well, if I'm self-managing, does that mean I'm being fake? Absolutely not. But the self-awareness is where you're going to be able to draw those lines a little more simply.
So you said it's about knowing yourself. And I'll go back to is some of the ancient, what we consider ancient beliefs about authenticity, is that authenticity is a self-construct, that living your truth is less about that self-expression, but more of a ruthless discipline. How do I know myself, what's important? And I think it was the Socratic method that said that all of this discipline of authenticity was to avoid self-deception.
Hmm.
So how do I know? if I'm sliding away from authenticity versus truly standing in a space of authenticity?
For me, you feel it. You feel it. You know when what you are doing feels unnatural. It feels like you're putting on a mask. It feels like you have to perform. You have to do something that, in your heart of hearts just doesn't feel right, but you're doing it for good reason, or at least a good reason you convince yourself of. Right. And so it's many times it's for, for acceptance or for belonging, right? Hey, I want to go along. I want to be accepted. I want to be with the cool kids, whatever it is, right? I'm going to do this because that's what they're doing versus asking yourself in that moment, is this me? And am I willing to stand in the discomfort, have the courage to actually set myself apart? Because it takes a lot of courage, to set myself apart and stand in who I really am. Not easy, and it may not feel good in the moment, but there's this peace that comes along with it. There's this alignment that comes along with standing strong despite what's happening around you.
So, when has your courage been most challenged to truly stand in that authentic space and not drift?
I mean, I have to think about this for a second. That's a great question. It's more in my personal life than in my professional life, if I'm completely honest. In being with um, people I haven't met before, trying to figure out who they are, what they want, or even some family members that, are very, very different from me, trying to figure out how do I be with these people, right? Because I wanna be liked. I wanna be accepted. I wanna belong. I don't think I'm very different from most people, but to what extent is the question for me, and when I'm with these people who are so different, I always have to ask myself, how far am I willing to go to try to connect and relate to them before I feel like I don't like who I'm being. I don't like how I'm showing up in this moment in order to please someone else.
And I think that's one of the challenges. What if you authentically value belonging so much that you're willing to significantly adapt? Is that still being authentic?
Then it comes down to which value is strongest for you in that moment, and the choice that you wanna make. Like, okay, I'm gonna assume that people are highly reflective for a moment, right? And I'm just, even myself, I'm not gonna lie and say that I haven't struggled with this as well. But it's in that moment making the choice of what's more important to me right now, what's gonna be even more important to me in a month from now based on the choice that I'm making in this. I really, really, really wanna be liked, but am I going to be proud of the choice that I made if I go ahead and do this? And then, of course, there's all the justifications, right? Oh, these people really wanted to be my friend, they would respect me for how I am, right? And so I can, back myself up and say, is this who really I really want to be friends with anyway? And I can start to justify my decision to stand in my authenticity to make myself feel better about it. Is it hard still? Absolutely. Is it hard to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that? And they go, fine then. And now I'm walking away feeling dejected. But at the end of the day, could I sleep at night knowing, hey, I stood firm in who I am, and it didn't win me those friends, but maybe that's a good thing. It doesn't feel good in the moment though. It doesn't feel good at the time.
Well, what growth does
Yeah.
feel good at the time, right? I think that's one of the hard things for us to constantly reconcile is those hardest moments when we unpack and extract the learning become our greatest assets. But let's go to the flip side. Well, actually, when you talk about the struggle of authenticity, where have you seen it in leadership?
And how they've misunderstood it. I think when the concept of authenticity came out, and I can't give you a year, I just know it's been a while. But I remember when this concept of authenticity really started hitting the workplaces hard. How leaders who struggled with emotional intelligence jumped on that bandwagon like it was a parade. They thought it was great because they heard, now have license to yell at my people because I am being true to me. I am being me. I can say what I want. I can speak my mind. I can, act like this because this is me. This is who I am. And that was what they thought authenticity meant. And so the work that had to happen around really helping them understand that authenticity, in addition to living to your values, was also, as I mentioned, the emotional intelligence skills, but also having the courage to step into vulnerability, right? How when something happens and you're triggered, sure, you can go ahead and start screaming at that person. But what that shows us is you're lacking in emotional intelligence. And in, like, what are you really yelling about? Like, what's really going on? What is really triggering this behavior that is quite unproductive? And that's where leaders would get a little stuck at first, right? It was like, "Oh, what are you talking about? It's because I'm mad. That's why I'm yelling." It's like, "But what are you really mad at?" "Well, because the customer called me and they're mad." Okay, but why does that bother you so much, right? And it's getting at what is underneath that. And, and I'm not gonna say it's every time, but sometimes it was, I feel like I didn't do a good job. And this brings up this emotion in me. And so I'm letting people know how I feel. And I thought, this is what we need to work with. So, what is another way we can talk about this or show those feelings in a way that's still you without causing destruction or leaving dead bodies in your wake?
Well, it's so interesting. The upside and the downside of any term that we've glorified or embraced in leadership. From vision, the upside is inspiration. The downside is total disconnect from where we are to where we want to be. In preparing for this podcast, one of the fascinating things to me was the etymology of authenticity, coming from the root authentis. At its best, it embraces agency and self-authorship. But at its worst, it is also used to describe a tyrant, someone who exercises complete unaccountable sovereignty over others. And so if we look at it through that lens, when we have that self-sovereignty without a virtue or a moral compass, if we don't adapt that to the needs, then it can just be that self-serving domination. So how do we make sure we're going down the right use of authenticity versus that self-serving domination?
Yeah. I think getting clear first on what your values are is a great start, right? Like, what do you really stand for? What's really important for you? What is it that drives you every day? What makes life worth living to you that if these things were taken away, you'd fall apart, right? So I think getting clear on one's values, what are your guiding stars, is one way to kind of get you moving towards, okay, so when are you noticing, right? When you're honoring these things, when your behavior honors those versus when it doesn't. And then it comes the discipline. So when you're faced with those choice points, and you will be, right? When you're faced with those choice points, what do you want to do? How will you stand, iron feet? How will you stand in those moments that are honoring the values that you say are important to you, so that what you do really shows that for people, that they can trust that what they see is real. It's really you. Because we know that when they see that consistency, when they see that you can still deal with things, even if they're hard, but you can still deal with things in a real way, it helps them to trust you. And then there's a skill building component, of course, as well.
So who you really are, that statement is interesting to me. It makes the assumption that you are a fixed being.
Ooh, didn't mean to say it that way.
Yeah, but I think it's very easy for us to make that assumption that this is who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And you said some two things that I think are very different, but very important in the topic of authenticity. And that is, you said, what do I stand for? But then the other side is, who am I? And there are very different entry points to exploring authenticity.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you there. And so I think, well, what do I stand for? I think that tends to be relatively stable, right? The values that I hold will be stable. Couldn't tell you for how much time, but they tend to be relatively stable. But who I am, we know we all have many parts. We play many roles. There are many, I want to say parts. Like I'm thinking of multiplicity, right? How we have so many parts to us, and who's coming out at whatever time is true and real and all that stuff. And I'm in a process right now of learning about, when is one part not better, but when should it come to the surface more than other parts? Different topic. But it's interesting as we learn about the various parts of us, one thing we always need to keep in the back of our minds is, again, what is guiding me? What is going to help me to make the best decision that's going to really make me feel good about whatever choice I make in the long run? Because again, it's not always easy at the time, but what is going to be that one that whenever I think about this, or whenever I am faced with a situation that and I'm going to go back to values, if this is in line with my values, it might be hard in the moment, but I will know I did the right thing because it is at the core of what's important to me.
It's congruent to all of those important things. So what I'm hearing you say is you cannot possibly be authentic if you don't understand what your values are.
That feels so feels so rigid.
Well, and I tend to bring in the rigid phrase.
Yeah.
So I'll
I
own
think
that.
you can. Let me think. Definitely helps. Like it definitely helps. Are there people who are authentic and have not been taken through a values exercise? Absolutely. Absolutely there are. But I think there is a part of them that knows when the way I am being is in line with my well-being, right? That when I am behaving in this way, I feel good about it. And it doesn't make choices easier sometimes. But in the end, I want to walk away saying I am proud of myself for making that choice because it does align with how I see myself.
You said this off camera before we started, and I think I've heard this term. Well, we've heard this term several times. When people say just be yourself, is that authenticity?
No, hell no,
What's the laugh?
because that's what people think it means,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and it's not, it doesn't mean I'm not saying it means, authenticity is the opposite of that. It's, be anyone but you. No, I mean, again, it's having that, do you know, and this is going to sound like a weird question, but do you know who you are and what you stand for? Like, are you clear on that? Because especially, the way the world is today, there's a lot of this go with the flow stuff. And, sometimes it just takes a little bit of that reflection to get the clarity that we need to say, like, is this how I see myself? Is this in line with what really is important to me? And I think when, just be yourself sounds like, well, that means I don't have to think about anything. I can walk through life, no filters. How does it feel to do that? Do you feel proud of everything that you've done and said through your filterless journey? Right. And so I think it's, practicing a little bit of just reflection and restraint and awareness, self-awareness, other awareness, right? Do you know how you're landing on people? So if just being yourself means that people feel destroyed in your presence, is that what you want? Is that what being yourself is going to do for you?
If it's self-serving,
Yes.
then maybe you don't care. I'm making the leap that if people are listening to this podcast, that they don't fit into that category. So there are three versions of authenticity that I found interesting. One is expressive authenticity. I just express what I'm feeling. One is moral authenticity, where it's very, very directed towards a purpose. And then the latter was adaptive authenticity. So when you hear those three versions of authenticity, what stands out to you?
I think I don't know, I have thoughts about each. And so I think with expressive, can you express what's going on for yourself? Absolutely. Better if you do, but it's in the how. It's in the how, right? And so again, this is not about I'm feeling a little down. I think I'm just going to, start bawling in a meeting. I'm being my authentic self. I'm hurting right now, so I'm just going to bawl. It's recognizing that again, we are still using emotional intelligence skills to figure out, this is getting in the way of me being productive right now. How can I deal with this in such a way that, I can bring my team with me. They know that they can trust me to be real with them without me doing something that has everyone feeling uncomfortable. And I'm hesitating at that word because we know that not everything that's uncomfortable is a bad thing.
Well, let me offer a reframe then, because this is aligned with some studies that really attack the pop authenticity that has been sold, that a leader just needs to bare their soul whenever they're going through hard times. And the reality is not discomfort, but when a leader does that in times of instability, it creates anxiety, and that creates inflammation inside the business. So how can you possibly inspire people to be creative and resourceful in turbulence if the leader doesn't find a way to communicate things with direction and calmness?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, I love what you're saying because it's making me think about, what it means to lead through ambiguity. And sometimes when a leader, and I mean ambiguity and authenticity, I mean these two things can really fight each other. When everybody sees that things aren't fine, the leader keeps telling you they are, right? I mean, people that creates ambiguity, it creates a mess. When a leader is struggling with something, falling apart probably isn't the best thing, but being able to bring your team together and say, you know what? I don't have all the answers to this right now. How are you guys all feeling? Being able to talk about it after they've expressed their emotion verbally, right? Like there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm I'm not gonna lie. I'm nervous about what's happening. I do feel some anxiety around it. I don't know where we're going, but I know there's hope. So let's get a conversation going around how we're all feeling around this and where do we all see hope and what are some things that maybe we can do? What are things we do have control over? And so just being able to be real, which means being able to vocalize what's going on for you, especially if you're like, I mean, we know people can sniff insincerity from a mile away. If you're that leader where everything's falling apart around you and you kind of puff your chest and you're like, I'm good, nothing's bothering me. They're not buying it. They'll see it. The second, that straw that breaks the camel's back and you just fall apart, they're going to be like, we knew it. Why couldn't you just be honest with us? Right. So, in the spirit of building trust, it helps to be open.
Yeah. And it's okay to be open in a very intentional way. One of my former clients was the CEO of a $1 billion organization, and he firmly believed that one of the most empowering things he could say with his senior leadership was, I don't know what the solution is. However, I'm sure that if we put our heads together, we can find out the answers. So he's still being authentic. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know, but shifting the focus towards what we can control.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So expressive authenticity. What are your thoughts on moral authenticity?
I think with moral authenticity, it's coming down to, I mean, are we are we shooting on ourselves? Right? Should SHOULD. Are we shooting on ourselves? Are we believing something about what authenticity means without really connecting to it? Right. And so I think this is around almost like, well, hold on, I might be mistaking that with adaptive. Would you
Well, I mean, moral authenticity, according to this theory, is very aligned to what you're saying is, are we acting based on our deepest underlying values, even when there's discomfort around it, especially when we're challenged by those values? Are we still operating based on that moral and values aligned authenticity?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where we're getting at what truly feels like um alignment for us, right? And I think if we're to go to the adaptive then would be totally performative. Is that what you meant?
No, so this is the fascinating one. Is adaptive is that our core values remain the same, but how do we flex based on the context and the audience? I'll give you an example. Is when we talk about authenticity, we can get stuck into a place of it being a very fixed thing and as opposed to being dynamic. And there are studies that have shown when leaders get promoted into executive levels and they use the same methods, they communicate the same, they operate the same, that the studies show that they tend to perform poorly. they tend to really stall in their development. And so there's an element of what do I have to adapt, even if it feels like a big reach in the way that I communicate, engage, and do my work, rather than staying so true to myself.
Right. Okay. So here's where my mind is going with this. It's like, is it about adapting your authenticity or is it about adapting your skill and mindset? Right. Because I think you're, again, if I go back to authenticity being values based or values driven, I don't know if your values will change that much, but what will change is what's required of you. Right. And so when you were at a, for lack of a better term, lower level in the organization, right? The skill and mindset that you had worked at that time, but we know that as you progress throughout the organization, you get higher up. Your view, your perspective, your skill set, your mindset needs to be different so that you can take the organization further, right, into the future. How you are authentic in those spaces, I would almost think it would be like a greater requirement. Like you as a leader, you're always going to depend on the people around you, like always. As you get further up, your reach to the people doing the work gets further and further. And yet, if authenticity is important in terms of bringing that into your culture, it needs to still come through. And so I think it's going to be around how do I, as I'm saying it, I'm questioning myself because it's like, how do I teach the people around me to also bring this? And I really want this thing permeating, right? My focus is different. I want this authenticity. I want it to spread. But I guess any leader at any level can want that. You got me thinking, Jayson.
Well, it's the way that I've seen it described is in the adaptive authenticity, your values don't change. You're not faking things when you get to different levels, but you do have to learn a new behavioral language to express those in different contexts. Whether as a parent, I can value certain things. I can bring that same value into the work that I do. The language could look very different. The way it's expressed, if I'm elevated into an executive team,
Hmm.
now the context, the way that I engage with my peers in that value can look very different. It can be very uncomfortable. It can be perceived as inauthentic when really it's just me trying to learn the new language of expressing that value so that I can be an authentic leader.
Did you have an example? Because I'm struggling to see why your language would have to change in order to still be seen as an authentic leader, regardless of the level you're in.
Well, let's take a value. Let's say the value is trust. If I work on your team and you're a middle manager, the way that you cultivate and create the conditions for trust with me is you have a natural authority because of our role. Now you get promoted into an ELT where now you different reporting structures. But now, how do you cultivate trust with the different executives where all have different agendas serving the vision and the mission? Some are expressed differently. How do you now activate trust in them? Do you have to exercise more into being territorial? Do you have to show up a certain way? That your value is still, I'm here to cultivate trust. But the mechanism for doing so could be very uncomfortable and could possibly risk being perceived as inauthentic. But the worst thing we can do is use a map that no longer describes the territory. Trust at different levels is activated differently.
Right. I got you. Okay. Will it look, yeah, I guess, will it look different? Yes. But I think that's where you're making the hard choices of whether to compromise or not. Right. And so when you were talking about adaptive, I think with real authenticity in those moments, if that value of trust is still very important to you, I think here's what my thoughts around this are is I'm learning as much as I can about what's important to the people around me. Right. Because building trust comes from the awareness. It comes from connection and relatability and figuring out, you know, how do I influence these people positively and deliver on what they want or what they need so that consistently they see that I can do this, right? So I can still build trust in the way that I know how. Might I do it a little differently? Yes, but it's making sure that, it's not like, oh, well, now that I'm in this position, that doesn't matter anymore because, hey, if I'm the boss, you just got to do it because I'm the boss, right? If I start acting in a way that is no longer congruent with that value for me, it won't take me long before I start to fail because I'm being something I'm not. People are going to see right through me at all, like 360 view. They're going to see right through me, and I'm not going to be happy. Like I'm not going to be successful in a job where I'm constantly fighting myself. And so I think the values will remain the same, but how they show up, yeah, I can see how that would.
Is different. So this brings me to the question then of fake it till you make it. Is that a tactic for authenticity?
Of course not. No, and I think we need to be, that saying needs to be. Let's replace the first it with what we really mean, right? Fake what? Fake what? Fake you? Fake your education? Fake you know what you're doing? Fake your experience? Like, what are we asking people to fake? The making it will come from not faking. Now, if it's work really hard, right? I'll buy that. What were you going to say?
I was going to say authority.
So fake authority until you're successful?
Fake fake authority until you make authority. I don't know if I believe it, but let's play with it. Where might it be true?
I don't know. I think I would work with that mindset altogether. I'd be like, how's about we substitute the word authority for influence? Because I think the word authority carries, I don't want to say a negative connotation because it is a fairly neutral word. But I do think when people talk about authority, they are talking about position power, which is only one. And we want our leaders to rely on so much more.
Okay, I'm going to weave in a study that challenges our initial response. That fake it to make it isn't the path to authenticity. There's a researcher called Herminia Ibarra, and the work showed that elite performers acted their way into new, very productive identities. They tried new behaviors. They mimicked behaviors of mentors, and the authenticity followed the behavior and not the other way around. That the fixed authenticity, this is not who I am, is actually creates drag on your performance rather than finding new behaviors to mimic until they become authentic. And I found that fascinating.
I have to see this study because all I can think about is, are we talking about influence skills? That I can do the things that would gain me positive influence, that would build trust, help me be seen as a leader, do the things in my role as a non-leader potentially, so that promoting me feels like a no-brainer because I have the skill set, the mindset, I've got followers, I've got everything. I've done what I have to do to be seen as a leader. But when we're talking about authenticity, did I do it at the expense of losing myself and acting in a way that may not have been in line with my values?
Okay, but I think that's an assumption. That faking it till you make it is making the assumption that you betray yourself in the process versus if this is ultimately tethered to something that is true for me, then how do I fake it till I make it? And let's go back to the example you gave at the beginning. There's a beautiful leader model that you had for 10 years. What were some of the qualities that maybe you didn't possess in the same way that you had to stretch into that felt uncomfortable?
Well, I can do because if it's a new way of thinking or being, living, I think that is one thing. And I mean, I'm gonna hit culture for a second, right? If I'm looking at it from a culture of, you know, top leaders in this culture backstab. I mean, you just can't trust. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot going on that you really got to get dirty under the fingernails to make it around here. I can emulate all that, and I can fake that. Backstabbing is part of who I am, and I can do this. But if inside I am dying, because that is not what I consider success. I might get promoted, but I'm not sure I'll have been authentic with myself in making those. Now, I'm not saying that that's how it always is, but if it's around, hey, if being a leader in this organization means you have vision, it means you have influence, it means that you believe in growing people. And it's like, well, I'm not sure how to do that, but I'm definitely curious. I want to find out because I align with that. Those values for me, that's what I want. That's what I'm striving for. And so I think taking the steps to do those things where I am right now
Well,
can be
I think we're going back to some of the fundamentals that we talked about earlier. Is what do I stand for? Well, if I don't stand for toxic backstabbing, then I'm not going to seek to elevate myself in this environment. What do I strive for? I strive for impact. So may I reach into different ways, a different level of confrontation of the backstabbers. I can still engage in confrontation to a point, maybe in an undesirable culture. It may be very uncomfortable and not something I would say is me. I'm not a confrontational person. There's maybe an authentic expression awaiting to happen so that you can serve your environment better. Is it still an expression of authenticity?
I think it comes down to the choices that you're making in terms of how, right? So are you watching what's happening and emulating despite the fact that it feels disgusting to you? Or are you looking the way things are done and going, I can't do it. I can't do that way. If being promoted means XYZ, how do I do that with an LOP, right?
Well, the word you use, I think, is what's more important. Is promotion the objective or is impact the objective? Because if promotion is the objective, then that can pull us into some of the more sinister behaviors if we're not tethered to the values and that moral element of authenticity.
For sure. For sure. Which comes back to, what does success mean to you? Right?
If you don't know thyself, then how can you possibly distribute an authentic version? Where do leaders get authenticity wrong?
I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's in terms of not realizing there are lines around it, right? And so it's not about pouring your heart out. It's not about losing your shit. It's not about you know, throwing a party for someone because they did something great and the whole shop knows it. That works for some. It doesn't work for all, right? It's still around having emotional intelligence skills. I keep saying this, but the emotional intelligence skills to know this is what a healthy, productive expression of my authentic self looks like. And it's done in service of relationship building and trust building and being able to lead people well, being a role model for others and saying, this, I want you guys to be real. I want you to, you're allowed to feel this stuff, people. I feel it, and this is how I'm going to show you that I feel it. But we're going to do it in a way that serves, our relationship and our cultures and all that stuff.
Yeah, the service component there, because it goes back to know thyself is a great entry point. That self-awareness is a great entry point to authenticity. But a study by a researcher named Thomas Shamaro Premusic, he explores leadership derailment. And he says self-awareness without adaptation, without that other awareness, just produces a bunch of narcissists.
Right? You have to you need to know yourself so you know how to manage yourself. You need to have other awareness so you know how to manage the relationship, right? Like they need each other for sure.
Well, I can know myself, and if I refuse to change or adapt to the needs of my team and my organization, well, guess what? That's that razor thin line of departure into the tyrannical route of authenticity versus the self-authorship and empowering version of authenticity. You want to play some true and false?
We can try.
Okay, true or false. I'm going to throw out some statements and your job, I've got two true or false scenarios. Your job is to make a call and then back it up with a story or tell me why you chose one or the other.
Okay.
And we've unpacked this one a little bit. True or false? Just be yourself is good authenticity advice.
False. false, right? So authenticity is about, aligning with your values, standing firm in, your guiding lights and expressing yourself in such a way that helps move things forward for the people around you as well. It's not about just no filter exploding and leaving your guck everywhere.
Okay, well, that's related to the second one, and that is that true or false, authenticity means saying what you really feel in the moment.
Again, it's true, but. And so I don't want to say false, but again, it's in the how. It's in the how. And so something hits you and if you're feeling it and you let yourself feel it, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Again, it's in the expression of that, right? So if you're having to leave the room for a few minutes to regain your composure, again, doing that is far better than, right? And so it's having the strength and the courage to notice, hey, what might bubble up right now will not serve anyone well, but I'm going to let myself feel this. I'm going to self manage for a few moments and come back and say, hey, guys, you know, this is what's going on for me right now. And being able to be open with people, but we're doing it with an eye to forward movement, right? Not getting stuck and we're not hijacking other people's brains.
Yeah, I think I'd build on that is just expressing what you feel. Okay, it's expressive authenticity, but it's one data point. If it's not tethered to what's the impact I want to have, how might I deliver that, then it may not be the best use of authenticity. Let's jump to would you rather. I'm sure you would agree leadership is just a giant game of would you rather. It's trade-offs, understanding the cost and the benefit. So I've got a few would you rather scenarios. Give me your gut response and then back it up. Here's the first one. Would you rather work for a leader who is emotionally transparent but inconsistent or emotionally restrained but highly predictable?
Oh boy. I am going to go with the predictability.
What makes that important?
Consistency is how we make decisions, right? And so when we see patterns, it's easier for us to make a decision. When things are sporadic, it's a lot more confusing and it creates a lot of ambiguity. Life's ambiguous enough. If I have to deal with a leader from day to day that I don't know what or who I'm getting, that is extremely stressful. Now, when you say emotionally restrained, I don't know if you mean like emotionally unavailable, or does that mean that, when they do express themselves, they're very intentional about it? Yeah, I would much rather that than have someone who's explosive or totally shuts up and you're getting the two extremes in a single day. I've seen that. It's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. Unpredictable, all of that. Second, would you rather be known as a leader who's deeply authentic or a leader who's deeply trustworthy?
I'm going to say authentic because I feel like you can get the trustworthiness from the authenticity, but you can't. Well, hold on a second. Can I be trustworthy without being authentic? Don't think so. Can I be authentic and not have people trust me? Maybe. Maybe. Okay, so as I think about this, when you're authentic, you're not always going to rub everyone the right way. So that's something I'm learning. I would rather work with a leader who's trustworthy because I can trust them all the time. Somebody who's authentic, though, um, our values just might clash. And it doesn't mean that they're a horrible person. It doesn't mean that it'll never work, but who their authentic self is, and that's who they're good in their own skin. Just because it isn't my cup of tea doesn't mean they're a bad leader.
Well, and maybe this is a bit of a trick question. If we go to one of the roots of authenticity is knowing what you stand for, therefore, your ability to say no should be enhanced if you know what you stand for.
Yep.
And there are studies that when it comes to the trustworthiness of a leader, it's their ability to say no to things is a trust elevator.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, if you see a leader acting in line with their own authenticity, it helps build that trust for sure. I'm toying with that. It's like, so if somebody is authentic, but our values don't align to it, does that make me not trust them? I don't know. I think I can still trust that they're going to be authentically themselves. Maybe it's just not a good fit personality wise or values wise. It doesn't. Yeah.
So if I'm someone sitting here listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, okay, I really want to take the next step in my authenticity. How do you develop authenticity?
Mm, yeah. I think it comes first or comes down to really gaining that self awareness, gaining that clarity around. I know we kind of went there with who we are, the parts of who I am. Um, but what is important to me? Like, really, really, what are the things that if these things were missing, life wouldn't be worth living? How do they guide me? And how do I respond when these things are being honored? And how do I respond when they're not? How do I want to respond when they're not? Right? What does standing firm in my perception, my self-perception, what does that look like for me? What am I willing to risk? What does it cost me when I don't? Like I think, having that self-awareness is an important part, followed by the self-management skills. And so, having the conversation around, so when it gets tough, when your authenticity is being challenged in the moment, and it's usually by yourself. It's not by the situation, the people around you. They're happy to do whatever. It's the choice you need to make for yourself in that moment, asking yourself, what am I risking by standing firm right now? Right? What is the conversation you want to have with yourself so that you can walk away and feel proud? Maybe not good, maybe not easy, but still feel proud.
Yeah. Easy and good may not always be the best path.
Mhm.
What's the worst advice someone could get around authenticity?
Just be yourself.
And what is it that makes that the worst advice?
Yeah. I mean, it is it what's the word? It denotes that authenticity is just about having no filters, and that's not what it is. Authenticity is about the self-awareness and the self-management and using that information to further along trust and impact in relationships. Just being yourself is kind of an excuse to just not have to give any thought to any of it. Not effective.
Irresponsible, lazy leadership.
Pretty much. I mean, it doesn't feel good to say it, but yeah.
So, if a listener only remembers one thing from this conversation on authenticity,
Mm.
what should it be?
Ooh. Authenticity takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to get curious about it. It takes courage to develop it, and it takes courage to protect it. That'd be my one big thing.
So, we've got discussions on courage, we have discussions around values, but for this conversation, if you've listened this far, I want you to find something that you like in this episode and put it to work. Start with something. Push to the next level of what authenticity means for you. That's what being in the laboratory is. Julie, thank you so much for joining me to talk about authenticity on the Executive Commute.
Thanks for having me, Jason.